Hi, Chris. Hello. Thanks for chatting on the hottest day of the year so far.
It's about to get hotter.
Yeah, well, right, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So we're here at Cardboard Citizens, which is a company that you lead. And to kick us off, I'd love you just to talk to us a bit about Cardboard Citizens and also why you wanted to lead this company.
Interesting question. Well, Cardboard Citizens has been around for around about 32 years. And it was initially created to work with, for, and about people that have experienced homelessness. And quite a lot of the time it used theatre of the oppressed methodologies, forum theatre, all of that stuff. And that was something that really worked, I think, for definitely in the 90s, definitely in the early noughties as a thing. But I think as time has gone on, social justice or arts as social justice, I say as social justice for a reason, but social arts for social justice, as it was then, it's slightly moved on, I think, in a different way. And so when I took over, I started to interrogate what that meant. And now we're a theatre company that does work with, for, and about people who have lived experience of homelessness, poverty and inequity, which is widening the remit for a massive reason that we'll probably talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did I want to lead this company? That's a big question. Well, I needed a job.
Yeah, it's a great reason. Yeah, it's a great reason. Yeah.
And it sounds a bit trite, but I think actually it's important to acknowledge that. I think that when you're an artist, or when you're somebody that it's really, also that feels really weird calling yourself an artist in an interview, but like when you're somebody that works in this industry, is in the theatre industry, in the artistic industry, and you come from a lower socioeconomic background, the idea of having like a PAYE job is such a massive thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm very good when I'm freelance. Not that I'm not necessarily like the best artist, like I can do the job, but I'm always worrying, like at least 30-40% of my brain is thinking, when is the next job? And the other thing is you enter like organizations and institutions, and then you're like, oh, I can't do nothing to change it because I'm just like a mercenary in this situation. But there is actually something wrong here.
Totally.
And then nobody's listening to me.
Yeah.
So that for me felt like it was important to be in an organization so I could do actual tangible change. But Cardboard Citizens I'd sort of known about, but if being honest, I didn't know really what they did, truth be told. And it's one of those sort of like mythical like entities. Oh wow, look, they're amazing. And you're like, actually, I don't really know exactly what you do. So it took me a bit of time to sort of interrogate what it was and what it was. And there was a couple of people that were really tying me from like my previous work and what I stood for with this organisation. And so when I delved into it a little bit more, I sort of understood why.
Yeah.
And applied for it on a long shot, really. But I mean, actually, if I'm being honest, the industry itself had like worn me down for a long time. I was sick and tired of like really fighting all the time. And I just kind of was about to give up.
Yeah.
And this was kind of weirdly like last chance saloon, as it happened. So I'd already applied for it, and I'd kind of had a terrible interview for another place. And then I was like, oh yeah, actually, I've already applied for this, and then they gave me the job. So it sort of brought me back in.
Amazing.
Is the truth. I mean, I have no idea what I was meant to be doing initially. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I probably would, I don't know, be somewhere in an air conditioning unit selling some soap that nobody needs or something.
Hey, well, thank goodness you got the job and you're back in the industry. Perfect. That's really good. So do you want to tell us a bit about, so you mentioned there that you've widened the remit of the company. Do you want to say us a bit more like why you've done that and why you think that's a kind of important change to make?
I think it's important because I think that we would be remiss as any arts organisation not to deal with those things. First of all, because it's a massive issue, and what with the particular political environment that we're sitting in right now, it's only going to get worse. Yeah. Do you know? It's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
More people are going into poverty. More people are going to end up being homeless.
Yeah.
And there's so much inequity. It seems like everything is becoming wider and wider. Yeah. Even if you just look at the trans issue right now, and thinking about how toxic and awful that has got for trans people. That we need to address these things because we are I think art is part of activism, and that we need to use it to inspire empathy, but also to challenge people's perceptions. But the other reason is that I've been homeless a couple of times throughout my life, and I knew I was homeless once because I was evicted when I was like 14, 15 from my council house. So in my brain, that's homelessness, and I went through my whole life, I'm 37 now, thinking before I applied for this job, I was like homeless once. And then I was looking at the legal definitions, and I was like, actually, I've been homeless about 5 or 6 times, and we have a semantics issue, I think, with the word homelessness. Because when we talk about homelessness, we think about people on the streets, and we think about rough sleepers, and we think about the people, because they're the people that we engage with the most. But actually, what about the people that we don't engage with that are really at risk? And you're talking about people that are suffering from domestic violence, that can't leave their house. They're homeless. The people that live in overcrowded houses, homeless. The people that live in unfit houses, ones that are damp. And there's a guy on Twitter, Quajo, is fantastic. He's like holding all of these housing associations to task because of all of this just awfulness, rats and damp and all of that stuff. And that's homelessness, right? But we don't think about that. And all of that stuff is hidden, and all of that stuff is going to get worse. So for me to widen the remit slightly so that people can go, oh, all of that is part of the same thing. And when I first applied for this job as well, I saw this thing that came up quite a lot of time about homelessness doesn't discriminate. I'm like, but I call bullshit. If you're looking at 1 in 23 black families in London that are at risk of homelessness in relation to 1 in 83 other ethnicities, that's a discrimination. 1 in 4 queer, young queer people are at risk of homelessness. That's discrimination. So I felt like we needed to address that. And because we're a theatre company, we should be obsessed with semantics. It's kind of funny how many theatre organisations are not obsessed with semantics, considering they should be, because they deal with words. But
that's super interesting. There's that quote, isn't there, which is we're all 2 paychecks away from being homeless. And you think about it, you think, well, no, we're not. Like that seems an incredibly simplistic way to think about that.
I understand it though. I understand from a point of view from like a charity organisation, just say, oh, actually, this could happen to you, and maybe you should give us some money. And I get it, but I don't think it's helpful because it doesn't take into consideration loads of other stuff.
Absolutely.
It's like, even we got to think about these things. When I worked at when I was the artistic director of the Bunker, everybody got paid the same. So they were on the same rate, which is great in theory. But the problem with that is that's equality. It's not equity. So me having nobody to give me money or like any support from any family to maybe, I don't know, buy a house, for instance, means that I leave that job in debt. And everybody else is fine. And gets a new job, a lovely job, and they get more money, and they've already started off on like third base and think they've scored a whole like home run. Do you know what I mean? And it's not to say like that was the people in the Bunker, in theory, but we don't think about that sometimes, and there's a privilege that means you don't have to think about that.
Absolutely.
And we should always be thinking about stuff like this.
Absolutely. And coming back to what you're talking about in terms of, we all have conceptions about what is and isn't kind of homelessness. Another kind of conception, I guess, and we find this a little bit in our work at Streetwise Opera, is when sometimes when I talk about what we do, people would say, well, why is opera or the arts helpful in this scenario? What is the use of that? Surely people need a roof. Surely people need a bed. Like that's what people need. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, if someone said that to you, like, how would you respond?
What's interesting, sometimes you've got to find the empathy in that comment, because it's kind of irritating. But I think I've done it. And I think, so I spent 6 months in Calais in a refugee camp. And I got sent out. I didn't do it out of my own accord. I went to go and help these 2 boys who had just set up this theatre, and somebody had sent me out because I was the right person to be sent out to help somebody do this. But when they told me to do that, I genuinely went, why? Why do they want a theatre? They want like systemic change and political shifts and clothing and housing and all of that stuff. But when you go into somewhere like that, which is like the higher level, like it's just pure it's the most extreme version of that, isn't it, right? And then you go, oh yeah, these people need a reminder that they're human.
Yeah.
Because they've consistently been told that they're animals in a jungle. Cockroaches, all of that stuff, whatever, the wave of refugees coming over it, like all of that stuff. And people need to remember, it's not just about living. It's not just about surviving, sorry. It's about living.
Yeah.
Like what, they do that thing all the time. They always use like art or the little niceties in life to bring people down. You know, they used to do it in the 90s, in the noughties, in the 90s when they were talking about working class. Chavs. Who were like, oh yeah, these chavs, they've got flat screen televisions and da-da. Well, we're not fine. Let them have flat screen televisions if they can afford it or if they've robbed it, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. Why does that matter? They're still in need.
Yeah.
Like, they still can't afford to pay their electricity bill. Like, you know, like, let them have something. Or we're not allowed to have like Netflix and avocados. Do you know what I mean? Because that's why we can't buy it. Like, no, like, can we at least have a nice moment in our lives, a little bit of escapism or a little bit of looking at somebody going through the same thing that we're going through. Art is more, it's a necessity, but we just don't think about it as a necessity. It should be part of the human rights that we have art. Because otherwise, what are we doing? We're just walking around, like, just being like, oh, that's a nice bit of nutrition. I mean, like, even food is a thing. Oh, yeah, they need food. Yeah, okay, what sort of food then? They're just going to drink, like, eat gruel. Like, let them have something that's enjoyable as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so, I think it's reductive, but I think it's there. And it's in people's psyches so that we stop, like, so that they can control that conversation. The people that are oppressing people is like control that situation. But you know, why not? Is my answer to like is genuinely my answer. Why should they have this? Why not?
That's a great answer. Yeah, absolutely. And earlier on you mentioned you were talking about art as social change, not art for social change. Do you like that? Feels like it kind of links into a little bit about what you're saying there. Do you want to expand a little bit on how you think about those two things? It's
an interesting thing to me because that art for social change means that it's a cerebral tool that can help push forwards social change, right? But the thing is if you're a recipient of how art is social change, like for me, I was born in a council estate in the centre of London, right? I could have been anything. Like, I mean, and I don't mean like Prime Minister or anything like that. What I mean is I could have been in prison. Like, I could have been a footballer maybe to escape, or a rapper, or a singer, or an actor to escape. And that's probably about as much as I could be. But I also could have been racist, homophobic, misogynistic, any of those things that were rife. Because once you're like an oppressed society, you turn inwards. Like you want to sort of survive and you want to fight against people because you're like, I need to take these biscuits and like, and you can't have these biscuits, and everyone's like, but there's no fucking biscuits anywhere, you know what I mean? It's like, but for me, if it wasn't for the moment when I first picked up a guitar and I started playing it, or when I first listened to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On album, or the first time I watched something that was like, spoke to me in theatre or in a movie, if I hadn't had that moment, I would have gone down all of those routes. But for some reason, it gave me a completely different narrative that I can push myself into, that I can go, oh, actually, I can see loads of different versions of me now, which I couldn't see on the streets, or I couldn't see in the estate. I couldn't see different narratives. I just had that narrative. And then all of a sudden, art gave me these opportunities to be here right now, sitting here with you, talking, and trying to articulate myself. Like, if I didn't have art, I definitely would have been, and no shade out of it at all. Like, I was either going to be in prison or like painting and decorating and anything in between. That's probably about as much as I'd got. And listen, sometimes I'm thinking I should have just done painting and decorating because it like pays a lot better than theatre quite a lot of the time. But like, that's all I felt like I could have. And then art widened that. And that, for me, I'm a living embodiment of why art is social justice. And so many of my friends are that I grew up with, and so many people that we work with are like testament to that ideology. Because if they didn't have that singing group, where would they be?
Absolutely.
Like, it's not a cerebral academic exercise. It's actually happening physically in people. It is social justice, not as social justice. And I think if you don't go through it, if you don't feel it in that way, then it does become an academic exercise. So then you do go, oh, art for social justice. Because you're academicizing it. That's not a word, but I make it up, whatever. Shakespeare did it, innit? So, but like that's for me why that terminology has come about.
Yeah.
And I think it's the tiny semantic difference, but I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot at Streetwise about the idea that when we work with our participants, our performers, when they're in the room, they're artists. That's what they are. That's their identity in that room. And actually, we are really clear. Like we're not a service. We're not doing any of those things. We're an arts organisation. We're not a company, and that's what we do. And I feel like that is part of that thing about what you identify within yourself. And so building on that, you have just launched Sits Futures, I think, which partly about creating that next generation of people coming into the industry. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah, it does sort of lead on to that from art is social justice, giving people the opportunity to be in the art.
Yeah.
I think the problem with a lot of art, and I would imagine, I was just talking about art galleries, and I'd imagine that visual art world is even worse, and probably maybe even opera to a certain extent. I would imagine in theatre, but theatre is really bad of like letting you know that there's other jobs.
Yeah.
So I did not know that. There was a role called a director. I don't think until maybe sort of early 20s. I definitely didn't know there was lighting designers, sound designers, producers, stage management, all of that stuff. I did not know that they existed. And actually, some of those jobs, those producing jobs, and the ones that you do back of house in theatres or whatever have you, they're like, again, it's PAYE. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes they're relatively decent wages, sometimes. Yeah. And you can do it on a regular basis. You can progress and it can give you a good good wage. Same as like being, my first ever job in theatre was unpaid crew. And for the Royal Court, which is, I owe a lot to it, but I also I was on an adult at the time, so I would have loved to have had some money, just to be in that moment. Yeah. But doing that crew role was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And this is a person that like did go to uni in the end and has like 2 degrees. I don't think any of that shit like mattered actually. It was literally rigging up a light in the Busty building in Peckham and filling in glory holes in toilets and stuff and trying to make it a theatre. And then they asked me to like come back to do the get-ins and the get-outs and stuff like that. And I started learning everything on the go. And they started paying me. It was like, it's decent enough. And then I sort of rose through the Royal Court in loads of different jobs. And then I have this like mad understanding of all of these jobs that I didn't know existed. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, it would be great if I'd have known that beforehand, because maybe I might have wanted to go into marketing or something, whatever it is. And Sits Future is that. It's paying people so that it doesn't mess with their universal credit if they're on universal credit, or it's part-time so that they can do caring, and if they've got any responsibilities that they need to go to. And it's flexible, so they can say the one we just did was 1 day a week, but you could make that 1 day a week over to 5 days a week if you wanted to. And this time around, we had an assistant director, trainee director. We had a trainee stage manager, a trainee costume designer, trainee stage designer, and a trainee lighting designer. So five trainees, which is amazing. But they went from the beginning of the process of making the play all the way to the end. Amazing. And they were there learning and doing work. Yeah. And learning at the same time. And what I want to do is to each play, each public facing show that we do, I'm committing to doing that every time we do it. But it doesn't have to be necessarily on the show. It could be the marketing. It could be the juicing, just trying to figure out which one's the right thing. And it's interesting actually, because if you look at sort of stage management and lighting design, were really, really hard for this show to get. Yeah. So there's been this massive exodus of people that couldn't go and work elsewhere, or just go, this is too unsure, I'm leaving. And so we've got this actual like talent exodus gone on, and staff exodus going on. And actually theatre talks a lot about rebuilding back better. Yeah. Talks a lot. Yeah. It doesn't ever do anything about it. So we can rebuild back all we want, but if you're not putting the infrastructures in for people to learn, and if we're doing our jobs right, we are working with demographics that are from underrepresented groups. So we should have more black stage managers or queer lighting designers or whatever it is that isn't that isn't represented in those roles. Lighting design and sound design are really quite male heavy. So how do we override that?
Yeah.
And this is our little way of doing it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that other people might follow suit as well, you know?
Yeah.
And so we'll put the time in.
So we obviously both work for organisations with quite a specific remit or quite a specific kind of focus. And, you know, a lot of what you've talked about there is kind of about inclusion and about, you know, us kind of wanting to make the arts sector kind of more inclusive in our different ways. What, in terms of the wider arts sector, how do you think, like, if you're not an organisation that works specifically with people that experience homelessness, what should other arts organisations be doing to sort of make that shift?
Well, you know, here's the thing. Quite a lot of those arts organisations are publicly funded, and quite a lot of them have spaces, physical spaces. I think the idea of a theatre is that it should be a civic space. It should be there for people to come in and use it how they want. And sometimes people are scared of that, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Like they really want to control something, or they want to put this. I think there's this a real problem with this high art thing in theatre, and probably the same in opera as well. Is that like it really excludes people first off, but I think it comes out of an insecurity. I think it's people that are like mad privileged, just being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this hobby as a job. I best make it like high art so that mummy and daddy like are not annoyed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it just really excludes everybody else, and then the building follows suit. And actually, everything matters when you walk into a theatre building.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
From what the music is playing to what you're serving in the bar. Like if I walk into a theatre and they've got some wanky craft ale, like immediately it just annoys. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh well, what's this? Like £9 for this beer that tastes like socks? Yeah. I don't want it. I don't like it. You know what I mean? Or like the steak comes up quite a lot with like young boys, young working class boys. And like sometimes I've taken people for like a meal in a theatre, and then like a sort of rare steak comes out. Now I know, over time that a rare steak is lovely, but I know that I needed it cremated when I was like 18. And when they go, oh, there's blood on this, but you've got to take this back. Like people are like, no, that's not how you have steak. Like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of judgment going on. Yeah. Or what the crisps and what, you know, all of that stuff. Yeah. It really, really matters. Yeah. But also, it's a space. It's warm. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes dry. I say that because the Royal Court used to have loads of drips in the bar. And you should give space for not only artists to come in and write, but just people, because it's a civic space. It's meant to be there. It was put there to be a civic space, and it's funded by taxpayers. So if they start from that notion, then I think it would inform their programming. But let's go back to like the real basics. Toilets, everything like that, you know, it will mean something. I mean, like I think I've been to the Tate Modern in my life about 50 times. Twice to go and see something. The other times I've just gone to the toilet when I've walked past. But do you know what I mean? But at least that's fine. That's okay actually.
You've gone in.
I've gone in. I've existed, and and you know that I'm getting ticked off as a visitor for their like Arts Council funding stuff. But so that's all right. That's okay. And just think about the little things. The little things are really, really important for other organisations. If you're not, who's it for? If it's just for your friends, or if it's just for everybody to tap themselves on the back going, oh, aren't we amazing? Then I think it's probably the wrong thing to do. But that's also probably why I'm not running a national or the Almeida. Do you know what I mean? Whatever. You know what I mean? Like I think maybe people are scared of opening up those spaces. But I think that's what they need to do. And then I think everything else will trickle down. And I think that's what I did I did it with the bunker. I did it. And like I've seen it, and that was honestly, I tell you, the most grimiest place going. Right? It was dripping. It was definitely not safe. But we still had a space for writers to come in that was dry and that had some really terrible Wi-Fi, some tea that they could just sit in, and very bad lighting, no light, no air, but they could come in and use it. And actually we were serving like potatoes as crisps, and like we had a normal beer, you know, that took a long time. And also things like free sanitary products.
Yeah.
It's just a tiny thing that means so much more for the person that's experiencing that stuff. When we just finished Bangers, and on this it was a set fundamentally of speakers, and on one of the speakers there's loads of graffiti all over it, like loads of like political graffiti, and one of the graffitis on it said "Trans Lives Matter," and somebody came up to me after the show and just was like overwhelmed by that tiny sentence that was on a speaker that means obviously massive. I wrote it. I remember writing it. Yeah. I just did it because I was like, bang, and then there's something else, and and I was like, yeah, I really believe it. But do you know what I mean? But it took me nothing, but meant so much to the person that came up to me and said, I felt validated in that moment. I felt validated. Yeah. It's the tiny things, and theatre's so bloody showy. Yeah. Arts are so showy. They want to do the showy thing. Just do the right thing. Yeah. I think that's how they can fix it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
I'll get off on my soapbox now.
No, stay on the soapbox. Great. So we're kind of, as we've sort of referenced a few different times, it feels like we're living in quite a kind of crazy, intense time. You know, I said we're sitting here on the hottest day of the year as the sort of impacts of climate change kind of crash down. And, you know, as we know, we work for organisations that work with people that have experienced homelessness, and like that is the effects of climate change are going to be felt hugely by, you know, at least some of that kind of demographic. So it does feel like it's quite a hard time, I think, in the world it feels at the moment. What keeps you optimistic? What keeps you positive?
You know, I did see this when you sent the questions over, and I saw you use love and rage.
Yeah.
And I sign off my emails as love and rage.
Okay.
Do you know why? Because I think rage is important. Actually, I think the idea is just depending on what you're doing, you're using it for. Like there is righteous rage. Like we are annoyed. Yeah. We are annoyed that there was a floppy-haired person in charge of us that didn't want to play the rules. Right? That is. We're okay. We should be enraged by that. Yeah. That's okay. It's the other rage that is being used against the people to turn inwards. It's that culture war. I read somewhere that they said that if it wasn't a culture war, it would be a class war, and they don't want that. So they keep perpetuating this culture war. That's really interesting. And you can see it. It's just whatever it is. It's climate change. It's trans rights. It's abortions. It's all of that stuff. It's just throwing all of this rage at us to be really angry at it. So we're actually not going, yo, these people in charge are really, we need to come together. Yeah. You know, and this has been going on for like 20 years. We've seen it. Yeah. But I also know that there are moments that we have to acknowledge when the joy comes in, and when the wins come in, when the W's come in, like we need to take a moment for that. And sometimes it's just an individual win. It's like, I don't know, it's looking at the success of RuPaul's Drag Race and seeing it go to all of these different countries. Yeah. It's kind of a win, you know, for so many different people, and that's joy. It's still really political. It doesn't have to be like massively political with like a big P. Yeah. But it is political. Our lives are political by just being here. Like, I don't think 50 years ago, 60 years ago, people didn't want you in your position. Yeah. And they didn't want me in my position. Yeah. And we are here now. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that is something to celebrate and to find that joy. Yeah. It makes me go, it shouldn't have taken so damn long, and I shouldn't be a rarity, and you shouldn't be a rarity, and everybody else shouldn't be a rarity. And we need to fight so that it is just normal. But the only way that we can do that, I think, is also, I was about to solve the world, but I'll leave it for a minute.
Okay, come back to solving it.
But what I think is, see, the thing with joy is it's revolutionary. In a world where we're so divided, and that we're meant to be so against each other and angry and scared, for somebody to have joy is revolutionary and actually can be part of the activism. And weirdly, British artists are really good at like finding that tongue in cheek. Like, look, if you look at someone like Banksy, right? The success of Banksy is fundamentally because he's just silly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he's mad political, but
Yeah.
so much of it is like super silly. And I think that we can use that joy in a rageful way as well.
Yeah.
Do you know, we can use it in a righteous way, in the same way that we can use rage in a righteous way. It's just, if the joy becomes just about you and self-serving, and if the rage just becomes about you and it's self-serving, then it's probably not helping anybody. So equal measures, but also you have to look after yourself as anybody, any agent, as an activist, or in any way, you have to look after yourself. And because I'm going to be terrible at taking down the world or improving the world if you're not right in yourself. You know what I mean? If you don't look after your mind and your body and your soul. And in whatever way that means, I don't mean like go get super fit and like meditate for 70 hours a day. Like what I mean is find your joy so that you can use your rage in a good way.
Yeah, that is beautifully put. Chris, is there anything you wished I'd asked you that I haven't asked you? Anything else you want to share with us about Cardboard Citizens?
No, I'm just happy to have a chat.
Great, I'm happy to have a chat. I feel like that's a good note to end on. Yeah? Great. Thank you so much. It's been so lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.